January 1943. Low over the soaked, cratered ground of Guadalcanal, a single F-4F Wildcat snaps into a hard, descending turn with 3 Japanese A6M0s stacked above and behind it. The jungle below is a blur of green and brown. The pilot pulls the stick to the stop and then does something no American instructor has ever taught him to do. He drops the flaps. Not a notch. All the way. Full deflection. To anyone watching, it looks like a mistake bordering on madness. The Wildcat's airspeed bleeds off instantly. Drag spikes. The airplane shudders, wings trembling at the edge of a stall. The Zeros tighten their circles, confident, patient, closing the trap they have closed 100 times before. Then the geometry breaks. Instead of sliding wide, the American fighter carves inward. The turn radius collapses. The Wildcat rotates around its own axis like a door swinging on a hinge. One Zero overshoots, flashing past the canopy. Another hesitates, momentarily confused by an airplane that should not be able to do what it is doing. The Wildcat's nose snaps through the turn. The gun sight fills with aluminum and red Hinomaru. The pilot squeezes the trigger. The Zero disintegrates. The air war over the South Pacific is not a contest of bravery. It is a contest of angles, speed, radius, energy. Whoever understands the math survives. Whoever does not become smoke over jungle or ocean. By early 1943, Japanese fighter pilots own the turning fight. The Zero's advantage is absolute and unforgiving. Its light structure, enormous control surfaces, and low wing loading allow it to pivot inside almost anything the Americans can field. In a horizontal engagement, tighter always wins. Wider means the enemy's guns arrive first. American pilots learn this lesson fast. Doctrine drills it into them from day one. Do not turn with a Zero. Use altitude. Use speed. Dive away. Extend. Climb back up. Attack only when you control the geometry. Never stay low. Never stay slow. Never commit to a flat turning fight. The F-4F Wildcat is built for survival, not elegance. It is armored, overbuilt. Its engine can absorb punishment that would shred a lighter aircraft. It dives well. It hits hard. But at slow speed, in a knife-edge circle, it is at a disadvantage it cannot overcome, on paper. The Zero, by contrast, was designed around one brutal priority, maneuverability. No armor. No self-sealing tanks. Nothing that does not serve turning performance. Japanese doctrine embraces this fully. Their pilots train relentlessly in close-in maneuvering, baiting opponents into bleeding energy, then snapping inside their turns for the kill. The result is catastrophic. By the time American pilots rotate through Guadalcanal, hundreds of them have already died trying to escape engagements they never wanted in the first place. The island itself is a scar hacked from jungle and coral. Henderson Field, a strip of packed dirt surrounded by wreckage, humidity, and graves. Aircraft land riddled with holes. Ground crews patch them with whatever metal they can find. Engines overheat. Guns jam. Nothing is perfect. Everything flies anyway. This is a place where doctrine ages in days. It is here, in this narrow gap between what manuals promise and what combat delivers, that one pilot begins asking the wrong question. Not how do I avoid the turn, but what happens if I must take it? His name is Marion Eugene Carl. Before the war, he is not a hotshot. Not loud. Not reckless. He grows up in Oregon, surrounded by broken machinery and practical solutions. Tractors that fail. Pumps that leak. Systems that must be understood or replaced. He learns early that problems are rarely mysterious, only misunderstood. He enters naval aviation not chasing glory, but structure. Flying, to him, is engineering made physical. Lift, drag, inertia, energy, equations written in aluminum and air. His instructors notice the way he flies. Smooth, deliberate, economical. He does not wrestle the airplane. He listens to it. By the time Carl reaches the Pacific with VMF 223, he already understands something many others do not. Doctrine assumes ideal conditions. Combat never provides them. The Wildcat is inferior in the turn. Everyone knows this. Carl knows it too. But he also knows that doctrine assumes altitude and speed are always available to trade. They aren't. Sometimes you are low. Sometimes you are slow. Sometimes you are alone. Sometimes the only question that matters is whether the airplane can do something it was never meant to do. just long enough to save your life. Carl begins experimenting alone, high above the island, where mistakes can be recovered. He studies the flaps, normally reserved for landing. He understands what they actually do. Increase camber, raise lift coefficient, lower stall speed. Drag increases, but so does turning capability. He tests half flaps. The Wildcat tightens its turn. He tests full flaps. The airplane hangs on the edge of controlled flight and keeps turning. The math is clear. The risk is enormous. But the margin exists. The manuals say never do this. Carl keeps flying anyway. And when the zeros come, and they always come, he waits for the moment doctrine runs out. Then he drops the flaps and rewrites the fight. Carl understands something critical that the manuals never say out loud. Doctrine only works when you control the engagement. In real combat, control is a luxury. Surprise, altitude, and speed evaporate in seconds. When that happens, theory collapses and only physics remains. Using flaps in combat is not bravery. It is a gamble with terrible odds. Deploying them commits the Wildcat to a low-energy state. Airspeed bleeds away instantly. Acceleration vanishes. If the maneuver fails, if the aircraft departs controlled flight or the zero anticipates the move, there is no escape. The enemy will close from behind and fire until the cockpit fills with smoke and glass. Carl knows this. He flies the margins deliberately, testing them until he understands exactly where the airplane will betray him. He learns how much back pressure the wing will tolerate before stalling. He learns how quickly the Wildcat responds when the flaps come down and how violently the controls stiffen. He memorizes the feel of the buffet, the warning tremor before lift collapses. He is not improvising. He is measuring. When he first explains the idea to his commanding officer, the reaction is predictable. Carl describes the aerodynamics calmly. Increased lift coefficient, reduced turn radius, controllable stall behavior. The commander listens, then cuts him off. Flaps are for landing. Combat is for speed. The Wildcat is not built for this. If it worked, the Navy's test pilots would already know. The conversation ends there. Carl does not argue. He simply keeps flying. Other pilots begin to notice. They watch him survive engagements that should have killed him. They see zeros overshoot when they expect the Wildcat to slide wide. Some ask questions. Carl answers them honestly. He takes a few pilots up and demonstrates at altitude. He lets them commit to a turn, then drops flaps and cuts inside. The effect is immediate and unsettling. The maneuver works, but only just. Skepticism remains. Many pilots see it as a trick that only works in training. Others worry about structural failure. The flaps were never designed for high-G deployment. Hydraulics could rupture. Wings could fail. And if the flaps jam down, the aircraft becomes a slow, vulnerable target. Carl has no perfect counterargument. He only has results. By January 1943, he has used the technique in combat multiple times. Each time, it saves him. Each time, it turns a defensive position into a firing solution. Still, no one writes it down. No one endorses it. It exists in the gray space between innovation and insubordination. Then comes the patrol over Guadalcanal. 4 Wildcats. Carl leads the flight. Visibility is poor, thin haze at altitude, broken cloud layers below. The radio crackles with a warning, bogies inbound, high and fast. 6 zeros. Carl rolls his flight to meet them, trying to seize the geometry before it is lost. The first attack works. He damages 1 zero and pulls up to reposition. Then the fight explodes. 3 more zeros drop from above, perfectly timed. The sky fills with crossing contrails and flashing wings. Carl brakes hard. His airspeed collapses. He is low, slow, and out of options. A zero slides in behind him. Carl feels the Wildcat shudder. He is on the edge of a stall. The enemy is still closing. There is no altitude left to trade. No speed left to burn. Carl drops the flaps. The airplane lurches. Drag spikes. The controls turn heavy as stone. The Wildcat is barely flying, but it is turning harder than physics says it should. The zero does not react fast enough. Instead of sliding wide, the American fighter pivots inward. Carl pulls through the vertical, nose dropping, guns swinging forward. The zero fills the sight picture. He fires. The Japanese fighter disintegrates and vanishes into the jungle. Carl retracts the flaps and regains airspeed just in time to see another zero threatening his wingman. He reverses, commits again, flaps down once more. The Wildcat bends around the Zero's turn like it was never supposed to. Another burst. Another kill. The remaining Japanese pilots disengage. The Americans lose none. Back at Henderson Field, no one jokes during debrief. Carl explains exactly what he did. This time, no one interrupts him. The squadron commander asks him to demonstrate the maneuver again, this time for everyone. The next morning, pilots line the flight line and watch as Carl repeats it in the air. Again and again, the Wildcat cuts inside a turning opponent. Again and again, the impossible becomes routine. By March 1943, the technique spreads quietly. No manuals, no official orders, just pilots talking to pilots. Veterans showing rookies where the margins are and where they aren't. Carl rotates home in April. He leaves behind no paperwork, no doctrine, no official credit. Only a method, a way out when doctrine runs out. Carl's technique is never issued as an order. No bulletin is typed. No memo circulates through Fleet Command. The Navy does not acknowledge it officially because official acknowledgement requires certainty, and certainty is hard to come by in a war fought at the edge of human limits. But pilots remember. They remember the man who turned with Zeros and lived. The knowledge moves the way real combat knowledge always does, quietly, informally, passed from cockpit to cockpit. A veteran leans over a map in a ready room and draws a circle tighter than it should be possible to draw. A junior pilot listens carefully and asks when. The answer is always the same. Only when you have nothing left to trade. Flaps become a last resort tool, not doctrine, but survival craft. Pilots learn the margins the hard way. They learn that full deflection will save you once and kill you if used casually. They learn to feel the buffet, to recognize the instant before the wing gives up entirely. Used with discipline, the maneuver works. Used recklessly, it ends careers and lives. Loss rates in turning engagements begin to dip. Not dramatically, not enough to show up in headlines, but enough that fewer pilots fail to return. Enough that squadron boards have fewer empty spaces. Enough that veterans notice. Japanese pilots notice too. Captured after action reports mention American fighters behaving unpredictably, turning tighter than expected, refusing to obey established performance envelopes. The Zero's greatest advantage begins to erode, not because the aircraft has changed, but because the assumptions behind it no longer hold. By mid-1943, the F-6F Hellcat starts arriving in numbers. Faster, stronger, more forgiving. It does not need flaps to survive, but even Hellcat pilots quietly adopt the technique. Used sparingly, used carefully, stored away for the moment when energy is gone and death is close. Carl is already gone by then. He returns to the United States in April 1943 with 18 confirmed kills. He is awarded the Navy Cross. He does a war bond tour. Then he is reassigned, not to command, not to doctrine writing, but to testing. It suits him. In the years that follow, Carl flies at the edge of what is possible. In 1947, he sets a world altitude record in the Douglas D-558 skyrocket. In 1953, he breaks speed records. He flies experimental jets and rocket planes that barely exist outside blueprints. He becomes a Marine general officer. He helps shape the future of flight, quietly and precisely, just as he always has. He never writes a memoir. He never claims credit. But his name keeps resurfacing, in pilot interviews, in margin notes, in conversations recorded decades later by historians trying to understand how young men survived a war that should have killed them. They remember the lesson more than the man. That machines are not fixed truths. That doctrine is not physics. That survival belongs to those who understand systems deeply enough to bend them without breaking them. Modern fighters no longer need such tricks. Fly-by-wire systems, variable geometry wings, thrust vectoring. Today's aircraft solve problems with computers faster than human hands ever could. The flap trick fades into history. The mindset does not. Innovation does not come from permission. It comes from pressure. From pilots who see the gap between what the manual says and what reality demands. From men willing to test ideas when failure means death. Marion Eugene Carl dies in 1998 at the age of 83, killed during a robbery at his home. A senseless ending for a man who survived hundreds of combat hours. But what he left behind was not senseless. He left behind proof that the rules are not limits, only starting points. that sometimes survival belongs not to the fastest or the strongest, but to the one who understands the machine well enough to ask one forbidden question. What if it can do more? That question, asked once, at the right moment, saved lives. And in war, that is everything.